Welcome to American Agenda. I'm Bob Seller.
And I'm Katrina Zish. Thanks for being with us.
Well, as former President Trump is awaiting, received an indictment, of course, he has met with advisors at Bedminster, New Jersey. Here with the report from there is Newsmax correspondent John Glasgow. John.
So the former president is expected to be in person for his arraignment hearing tomorrow in Washington, D.C. Now, this is going to be similar to what we saw in Florida and in New York when he was indicted and arraigned. It'll be booked, processing, probably a very quick proceeding, and then out of the courtroom. Now, Trump has taken to Truth Social. He's also made some comments to ABC News where he's called this indictment a pile-on to some of the other charges that he's currently facing. But unlike the other two indictments that he's facing, these charges stem primarily from what Trump did.
We did want to bring you this with a look at the Capitol right now. There's a Senate building called the Russell Building in which there are reports of an active shooter. Everyone has been ordered to stay in place. And this is attached almost to the Capitol. There are underground ways to get to it and from the Capitol. But this is at a time, Katrina, that actually the Senate is not in session. So that would be the only thing that's good is this time of the year tends to be not as populated. It's very hot. You know, it's August. They take a recess for the entire month. So the Senate itself is not in session.
That's right. And police reportedly responding to a 911 call. So they are looking around the building. And as Bob said, anyone who is there in the Senate building is being asked to shelter in place. And of course, we will keep you up on this as we learn more. We're going to go back to this now while the former president is facing multiple indictments at the same time. What will his defense strategy be? We'll bring in our legal experts for today, trial attorney and former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani, distinguished professor from Troy University, Thane Rosenbaum, and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Randy Zelen. Randy, I'm going to start with you here. You are, of course, know a lot about defending people in court. What would your strategy be now? Former President Trump supposed to appear tomorrow. And then what happens? Take us through some of the procedural things that will happen.
Well, tomorrow is easy. He's going to walk in. He's not being arrested. There's not going to be a perp walk. He's not going to be handcuffed. He goes into the court building. He will be processed. He will be brought in front of the judge. The judge will confirm that he's received a copy of the indictment. The judge will confirm that he has reviewed the indictment with his attorney. How do you plead? I plead not guilty. There'll be a conversation about the conditions of his release, which there will be none. He'll be released in his own recognizance, and then the case will be kicked out for another date. And I don't really see much more being discussed than that.
Yeah, Thane, I wanted to ask you about this. A lot of this depends on conversations that the former president had with all kinds of lawyers. Some of them identified as co-conspirators. I believe 4 out of the 6 co-conspirators are lawyers. But what I wanted to ask you about is what happened to the executive immunity or the fact that, what's the term where you're supposed to be able to talk to your lawyer about anything?
Attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, why does that not apply here? I'm not addressing, for instance, anything concretely that may have taken place. We can discuss that. But why aren't the conversations privy to that?
It should be, Bob. I can assure you Donald Trump's lawyers are going to talk about the attorney-client privilege and how the co-conspirators who are unnamed are all lawyers giving him legal advice. Guess what? He's allowed to get legal advice. He's allowed to get bad legal advice. He's allowed to accept the legal advice and act on it or not. You know, this is what's really extraordinary in some ways is if I was Donald Trump's lawyers, I would say, in Florida, they say that the Presidential Records Act does not apply to me. It applies to every other president, but it doesn't apply to me. Joe Biden has documents in his home, and that the Presidential Records Act does not protect him because he was never a president. And here, the First Amendment does not apply to me. It applies to everyone else somehow, but my rights as a presidential candidate to engage in political advocacy are thwarted. Why? Hold it, wait for it. Because I unlawfully rejected the election results. Now, I don't know, I'm a law professor. I don't know where that statute is. I don't know where that is. Early in the indictment, they say he unlawfully rejected the election results. Is there a law that says he must accept the results? It's just so fascinating. The whole case depends on tweets and conversations, things that are generally constitutionally protected. Okay. And it is the core argument for his defense strategy.
Randy, I see you shaking your head, and I do want to get your thoughts on this, but I want to go to Neama first. I want to bring it into the conversation. Your reactions, what do you want to share?
Well, I like this case for Donald Trump, certainly a lot more than the documents case, because his lawyers can attack that knowledge and intent. And that's why when you're looking at the indictment, Jack Smith spent so much of his time talking about what Donald Trump said and what was said to him. Because this is the type of case, unlike the documents case where Trump has already admitted to knowingly possessing those classified documents. Of course, he's going to argue that they were declassified. This case, though, Trump can say, I was conducting an audit of the 2020 election, and it was within my right to do so. Or like Randy said, I was following my lawyer's advice. Maybe it was bad advice. Maybe it was an aggressive legal argument. But if Trump truly did not know that he lost the election and he didn't intend to overturn the results, then he gets acquitted. The burden's on the prosecution to prove that knowledge and intent beyond a reasonable doubt.
Jack Smith has put the president in a box. Why? Number one, if the president avails himself of the now what I will call Mike Pence defense, I relied on my crackpot lawyers.
Randy, I hate to do this. Don't mean to be rude. We did want to follow up on that story we're telling you about in Washington, D.C., reports of an active shooter. Let's go to Logan Raddick. He was in Washington. Logan.
Well, there's no confirmation that there is an active shooter, although I can tell you, Bob, right now I'm on the House side of the Capitol. This is all taking place in the Russell Senate office building, which is currently on lockdown. There are police and fire trucks that are outside and now going inside the Russell building. But this is what the Capitol Police put out in a recent statement. They say, quote, our officers are searching in and around the Senate office buildings in response to a concerning 911 call. Please stay away from the area as we are still investigating. We will continue to communicate with the public here. If you are inside the Senate buildings, everyone inside should be sheltering in place as the report was for a possible active shooter. It should be noted that we do not have any confirmed reports of gunshots. So that is from the Capitol Police. Right now, people are being told to stay away from the windows. We're still working to find out what is going on over there. But again, there's no confirmed shots fired, but there is some sort of a security situation that is causing a lockdown right now in one of the biggest Senate office buildings.
Yes, you cover the Capitol, of course, 365 year-round. There is a recess now with Congress. How is the activity level today compared to a normal day when the Senate especially is in session?
Well, it's very quiet here, Bob. As you mentioned, it's the August recess, and especially with lawmakers out of town, it's very quiet. This rotunda, which is normally very action-packed while lawmakers are in session, is very quiet today. So there are some staffers here on Capitol Hill. So there is concern right now. But again, it's a different scenario than if lawmakers were here, but less people to monitor coming in and out of buildings with the lawmakers at home, and also a lot of staffers either working from home or back in districts right now.
All right, Logan Raddick, thanks so much. And of course, we know that you will keep us posted as we get more information. Thank you. Let's go back to our discussion with our three fantastic lawyers, Neama Rahmani, Thane Rosenbaum, and Randy Zellin. Randy, you were mid-sentence, so sorry to interrupt, but your thoughts.
That was a slightly important interruption.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
So, problem number one for the former president. You would think an easy defense is advice of counsel, as again, that Mike Pence for me dropped the mic moment. He was relying on his crackpot lawyers. That sounds like an instant acquittal, except the second you blame your lawyers, the attorney-client privilege goes bye-bye, and now suddenly the attorneys are basically not only can they, but they're almost compelled, particularly when they're unindicted co-conspirators, which brings me to problem number 2, which is as unindicted co-conspirators, they could become indicted co-conspirators. How do they avoid becoming indicted co-conspirators? Come in and tell the government what the government wants to hear, which is, of course, the former president knew that this was all false and all made up and all a lie. Here, the former president has one defense and one defense only, up here. I didn't intend to commit a crime because I truly believe that I won the election and it was stolen from me. And I did not know that I was doing anything other than saying, hey, I won and I want to be your president.
Thane, let me ask you about, are we at a point where the certification of the election should be pushed back a little? Up until 1937, the president didn't take office until March. Now, that's because they had to get on horses and buggies and go up to the Capitol or to Washington. But should there be more time before certification takes place so that we can have the audits, we can have the recounts, for the sake of people believing in the integrity of the electoral process? Maybe everything's been rushed so much that if you gave enough time for these things to play out, there wouldn't be these questions in the president's mind or any voter's minds.
So here, let's go back a little history, Bob, from our classes that you and I have together. In the election of 2000, right?
Yeah.
Ron Klain, who worked for Al Gore, was running down the street telling someone, get to Al Gore and tell him not to concede the election. We still think we can win Florida. And they had to convince Al Gore to actually contest the election. This is only coming up now. And it's also, historically, for the best interest of the country, people, routinely accepted the election results so that the time period for the certification didn't matter as much as what you're saying. But again, let me just remind everyone what was so significant about 2020. Mail-in, write-in, absentee ballots, tens of millions of them. It ended up causing an enormous amount of doubt in the minds, certainly of red state voters. And let me just say one last thing about this. It's interesting in the indictment that that Jack Smith refers to, what does he call it? Outcome determinative fraud. Outcome determinative, such an interesting term of art. What is it? I'll tell you what I think that means. It means I'm not saying there wasn't fraud. I'm saying it wasn't outcome determinative. But if you're going to admit that there was no outcome determinative fraud, then you're playing into the hands of Trump voters that are saying, there's a reason we came to the ellipse on January 6th. Yeah. There's a reason we were so upset, because we saw things, we heard people signing affidavits that there was problems with the election workers. We had a reason to doubt. So I find it very interesting that they use that term of art. I don't know why they use it, but to me, it opens the door.
Neama, I'm sorry we don't have more time today because of the breaking news. We owe you one, the next one. Randy, thank you. And then Thane, in class next week, I'm hoping that we're going to talk about 1960 in Hawaii, where they had contested election, and they first said they voted for Nixon, then they said JFK, then JFK, they sent 2 sets of electoral votes to Washington. So this is something that's going to come up in this case as well.
Nina, is there any doubt why he gets an A every semester?
I'm sitting here thinking, wow.
Where's he going with this?
Yeah. Well, I thought that too a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it. All right, let's move on.
Yes.